Not a probe, not a test. A full-scale coordinated assault across every major sector of the front line, simultaneously. Nearly 200 military operations every single day. Their most experienced armies, their entire remaining offensive capacity, directed at one goal: break through Ukraine's lines and seize Donetsk before summer. They failed. Not partially, not on one front, on every front, simultaneously. And the number that proves it was released publicly by the Institute for the Study of War on May 2, 2026. Ukraine closed April with a net gain of 116 square kilometers of recaptured territory. That is not a headline, that is a verdict. And what it reveals about Russia's military machine is far more devastating than any single battlefield loss. If you want the real story behind the numbers that Russian state media will never show its own people, you are in the right place. This channel exists to cut through the noise and give you the military, geopolitical, and economic analysis that actually matters. Hit subscribe right now, because what happened in April 2026 is not a moment. It is a turning point, and we are tracking every development as it unfolds. Let's go sector by sector, because the story isn't just that Russia lost ground. It's how they lost it, and why they cannot stop losing it. Across every major axis, Kostiantynivka, Liman, Zaporizhia, Pokrovsk, the same pattern repeated like clockwork. Russian small units entered the gray zones between Ukrainian defensive positions. They expected to establish footholds, wait for reinforcements, and consolidate control. Ukraine did not let them consolidate. Before Russian units could dig in, Ukrainian assault groups, guided by drones, struck the flanks. Robotic systems cleared the positions. The terrain was secured and held. Russia's own playbook was used against them, and it worked every single time. At Kostiantynivka, the southern gateway to Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, the hinge of Ukraine's entire defensive architecture in southern Donetsk, geolocated imagery confirmed Ukrainian advances in sectors Russia had publicly claimed were under its control. Defense analyst Denis Popovich assessed it with clinical precision. This area has been fortified since 2014. The enemy could gnaw at it for years, but the cost-benefit ratio is catastrophic for the attacking side. Around Liman, Ukrainian flank pressure halted Russian advances and recaptured several positions. Near Zaporizhia, Russia managed to form two narrow salients along a 15-kilometer front and then completely failed to expand either one. Strategic analyst Pablo confirmed that Ukrainian forces trapped both salients in corridors that could not be widened without absorbing losses Russia could not afford. At Pokrovsk, the same story. Russian infiltrations entered. Ukraine applied targeted flank pressure. The positions were recaptured. Alexander Kovalenko of the Information Resistance Group delivered the assessment that deserves to be read twice. The spring phase has effectively failed. They are now taking in a month what they took in a week last summer. Stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through is not just what happened in April. It is the reason this pattern will continue, and why the Kremlin may have no clean way out. 4 structural failures produced this outcome. They are not parallel problems. They are a cascade, each one making every other one worse. In February 2026, Kremlin restrictions on Starlink terminals in occupied territories severed drone video feeds and cut real-time coordination between adjacent units. Navigation reverted to paper maps, In an era of drone warfare where real-time positioning is the margin between effective assault and walking into a kill zone. Simultaneously, restrictions on Telegram inside Russian military structures severed the operational backbone that officers had used to share orders, transmit coordinates, and move intelligence between units in real time. ISW's assessment was unambiguous. Without stable communication infrastructure, coordinating an offensive operation has become nearly impossible. Ukraine gained hundreds of square kilometers during and immediately after this disruption. Those effects are not resolved, they are compounding. The winter of 2025 to 2026 was colder and wetter than the year before. The spring thaw produced what military historians call Rasputitsa, the mud season that transforms eastern Ukraine's terrain into something that defeats mechanized movement as effectively as any fortification. Armored assault capability dropped to near zero precisely during the window Russia had built its entire offensive timeline around. The ground itself collapsed the plan. Journalist Pavlo Kazarin reported recruitment of new contract soldiers dropped 20% year over year. In Q1 2026, Russia recruited only 70,000 soldiers against a target of 90,000, despite one-time signing bonuses now reaching between $30,000 and $50,000 per contract in some regions. The bonuses are simultaneously failing to fill the ranks and consuming the defense budget at a compounding rate every quarter. Reported personnel losses are outpacing recruitment. The gap is growing every single month. The Kremlin is not declaring a new mobilization because the political trauma of September 2022 is still acutely present in Russian domestic memory. The bonuses are the substitute for mobilization. The bonuses are not working. As armored vehicle stocks depleted through attrition and production shortfalls, Russia shifted to an infantry-heavy model. The tactical result? Units advancing on motorcycles and ATVs across open terrain, directly into Ukraine's FPV drone barrier. In the third week of April alone, Russia reportedly suffered 7,480 personnel losses for every 41 square kilometers of territory gained. Every square kilometer of advance costs the effective combat capability of 2 to 3 full battalions. That ratio is not improving. It is worsening as the quality of available personnel and equipment declines simultaneously. These four failures do not run in parallel. They form a loop that tightens with every passing month. No communications, no combined arms coordination. No combined arms, no armored maneuver to suppress drone operators. No armored maneuver, infantry exposed in the open. Exposed infantry, catastrophic losses. Catastrophic losses, deeper personnel crisis. Deeper personnel crisis, bonus inflation. Bonus inflation, budget pressure. And that budget is already running at $186 billion in 2025, over 7% of GDP, approaching Soviet-era levels. Against a backdrop of inflation above target, interest rates above 20%, and a skilled labor shortage across the Russian economy that has now reached 4.8 million people. Russia is no longer able to fully defend both Donbass and Crimea simultaneously. Every resource decision on one front creates an exploitable vulnerability on the other. That is not a tactical problem. That is a strategic crisis. The data makes the collapse undeniable. Russia's daily territorial advance rate stood at nearly 10 square kilometers per day at the start of 2025. By April 2026, that figure had fallen below 3 square kilometers per day, a threefold slowdown. And critically, this did not happen because Russia reduced its attacks. Russia increased attack frequency during this period. More operations, more resources expended, less territory gained every single month. The Kremlin's answer to this data is a sophisticated information operation. Small units are pushed into gray zones between Ukrainian positions. They cannot hold the terrain. They cannot maintain supply lines. They cannot be reinforced without crossing ground that Ukrainian drones monitor continuously. But they can be announced as captured settlements, because Kremlin state media does exactly that on a near-daily basis. ISW maps these infiltration zones separately from actual territorial control for precisely this reason. Most of the settlements announced as captured are areas where Russian forces cannot maintain a stable foothold for more than days before Ukrainian counterattacks push them out. Ukraine, by contrast, has now recaptured approximately 600 square kilometers of territory from Russian control since 2026 began. Interceptor drones are reportedly blocking Russian airstrikes at rates as high as 95% in certain sectors. Precision strikes are systematically dismantling the logistics infrastructure, ammunition depots, command posts, fuel storage, supply lines, that Russia needs to move anything forward, even when the resources exist. Zelensky stated publicly that for Russia to fully occupy Donbass, by his assessment, would require between 300,000 and 1 million soldiers. Former intelligence chief Malamud assessed Ukraine's posture with precision. Ukraine has achieved a robust operational model across all key sectors, the most challenging sectors, which are also where the enemy suffers its heaviest losses. Kovalenko identifies the priority axes with analytical specificity. Huliai Pole is the primary offensive focus. Russia's objective is to encircle Orikhiv and advance westward behind Ukraine's fortified defensive line, laying groundwork for a future operation against Zaporizhzhia city. Kostiantynivka is the most dangerous scenario. Russia will attempt urban infiltration through industrial and southern districts, repeating the Bakhmut playbook. Ukraine's drone barrier and robotic operations are making these urban infiltrations dramatically more costly than Bakhmut. Pokrovsk remains an effective stalemate. Russia has failed to expand its two salients, and Ukrainian flank pressure is preventing any change. Lyman and Kupiansk. Russian consolidation efforts continue to be dismantled by Ukraine's robotic operations. And Kovalenko flags an underreported risk. Gradual Russian pressure along the state border in Sumy, Kharkiv, and potentially Chernihiv. Systematic probing of gaps that Ukraine cannot fully garrison simultaneously. Militarily, economically, politically, every dimension points the same direction. The spring offensive has failed in its first phase. The structural failures are not resolved. They are compounding. Military bloggers inside Russia are now criticizing tactical failures openly. Citizens in occupied towns are filming complaint videos. Factory workers are waking to drone alerts. These are individual data points, but collectively they represent measurable erosion of the security narrative Putin's entire domestic position depends on. Kovalenko's final forecast is precise and carries a careful warning against premature celebration. Ukrainian defense forces have not yet achieved a breakthrough capable of triggering chain reaction collapse. Ukraine does not appear to possess resources for a large-scale counteroffensive, but it may not need one. The asymmetric attrition strategy is producing documented, geolocated, measurable results, systematically depleting Russian reserves, increasing the cost of every attack, forcing the enemy to defend where it planned to strike. The war will likely focus on shaping conditions for a future turning point, rather than producing that turning point immediately. That turning point could emerge toward the end of 2026 or into 2027. Putin's victory plan for spring 2026 exists on paper. The spring offensive failed. The structural failures are compounding, and every piece of data from the front line tears that plan further from the reality it was supposed to describe.